Hi, my name is Shelby Dhalla-Kim. I'm a passion coach, and this is Firestart Chat. Firestart Chats are intimate conversations with people who have and are clarifying their passions for change. We'll hear their stories, their experiences, and tools on how they've been able to do that. Today's Firestart Chat is with Denise McLeod, a Ojibway from Sagamok Anishnawbek First Nation survivor of the last generation of the Sixties Scoop. Denise proudly defines herself as an urban Indigenous Indigiqueer woman. She is passionate about preserving cultures and traditions of Indigenous Anishnaabe peoples. This especially flows through her work as a professor, consultant, and facilitator. And Denise is also a very proud founding member of Toronto-based Indigenous Women's Comedy Collective, Manifest Destiny's Child, founding member of Doula Collective, Ode'Min Giizis Full Spectrum, and founder of IndigiBabes Burlesque. Please join me in learning from Denise on how she clarifies her gifts, what she teaches people on, and questions she asks herself to create and lead. Okay, Denise, you do so many things, and you're one of those people, every time I talk to you, you're doing something incredible using your passions for change. And so tell us what you're up to these days.
Oh my gosh, what am I up to these days? I teach. I teach, and so my title is professor at and I teach like Indigenous content and anti-violence, anti-racist, anti-oppressive content at a community college in Toronto. I do some other anti-racist equity work for a corporation in Toronto. And I'm very vague and I'm so sorry. Um, and that all sort of that like kind of fills my cup in ways that I get to like teach. I love to teach. I am a teacher at heart. That was not the goal when I was a kid, but I am a teacher. And I have a lot of like, I'm really lucky to have a lot of art stuff going on, and it's not the like traditional sort of art that people would think. Like I'm a stand-up comedian. I just finished this pretty big show for the Comedy is Art Festival at the Theatre Centre in Toronto. We were the closing show for the Comedy is Art Festival, which is kind of a big deal. So that is how I'm doing like comedy stuff. And I'm also like, I still think that I'm a pretty new burlesque dancer. I'm still a baby. Like I haven't really been doing this for very long. But I burlesque dance now, and I started a burlesque collective, burlesque group called IndigiBabes Burlesque, and it started from a 14-week burlesque training program. Training program. It sounds very like educational, doesn't it? It was like a 14-week burlesque workshop that for Indigenous folks. And then like six of us, like the core six of us have went to Ngojinawang for the Indigenous Fringe Festival, or Peterborough for Ngojinawang's Indigenous Fringe Festival. This will be aired probably after, but Saturday, November the 12th, I'm going to be, the IndigiBabes Burlesque are going to be in the Wasagachuk. Wasagachuk Begins to Dance Festival for, and we have monthly-ish shows, burlesque shows. And I'm making some other art with friends that is in the works, and other people are starting to approach me to do these like really cool events. And every month I'm like, okay, after you're done this thing, you're going to start saying no. But then somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, I really want to do this really cool art thing. And I'm like, yeah, let's do this really cool art thing. I have a friend that approached me to do like a fat babe burlesque show. And so we're going to ask folks who are like plus size or extended sizes or bigger bodied fat people to who are burlesque dancers or performers to perform with us. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Uh, but at the end of October, I was like, look, after the Wasaka Begins to Dance Festival, I'm done. But then, these other really cool things happen. And so what else is happening? I'm sure that I'm missing stuff, but I think burlesque is kind of taking over most of my days these days.
Okay, so tell us how that started. What inspired it?
So I have a friend. Her name's Belle Jamel. She hosts sort of Belle Jamel's Burlesque 101 workshops. And like 3 or 4 years ago, she was like, oh, she put out the call out, like, September, I'm going to do these workshops. If anybody's interested, let me know. And I was like, oh, I'd really like to do that. And I kind of went into this spiral, like this, like YouTube spiral of, is there an Indigenous burlesque dancers? Spoiler alert, there is, obviously. But I didn't know because I wasn't really in the burlesque scene. I just like really admired the bravery of, and I don't like bravery. I just like, I admired these folks who got on stage and were so sexy and confident and beautiful. And I was like, I want to be like that. So I'm going to take a burlesque program. And then I was like, I'm going to do this thing. And then I asked Belle, I was like, hey, I have this idea. Do you want to meet for like a coffee or something? And so we met, and I was like, I would really like to have like an Indigenous burlesque workshop series. And Belle's like, sure, I'm happy to support you as a non-Indigenous person. Like, I don't feel comfortable sort of taking up that space, but like, I will happily support you. And then I went to the East Coast for this 3-week program called the Indigenous Women in Community Leadership Program out of the Coady Institute at St. Francis Xavier University in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. And I spent 3 weeks there, and they wanted a community project. And I was originally going to do this like community project that like talks about birth work and really focusing on like creating more doula training programs and full spectrum doula training programs for Indigenous communities. And this is what I was going to do. And then I was like, no, I'm gonna create an Indigenous burlesque training program or like workshop. I'm gonna do this thing, and it was kind of like a really out there idea, and the mentors were really like, everybody's been really into it, which has been really lovely. And a part of me also wanted to do this to like, it sort of evolved in this, like, I don't see people who look like me on the stage. I don't like, Western standards of beauty tell me that I'm not attractive and tell me that I'm not supposed to, feel sexy or feel sensual or feel confident. And also like, then the other stories of like, Indigenous women are sacred and we have to be modest. And, that modesty comes from like this, our safety. We have to like, our safety is first and foremost because we go missing and we are murdered, and all of those things are true. And I was like, man, I just want to like get my tits out to a Prince song. Like, that's just what I want. Like, I just want to feel fun and sexy and feel like I too can own my sexuality in a way that I never sort of been able to do. And so I applied for a grant. The first time I got denied, and I was pretty like, I tried really hard not to be like, take it personally, like, oh, and I've never really written grants before. So like that first grant was like hard, right? Like that hard, like, you don't believe in this thing. And then I wrote it again, and maybe about a year later, and I got it. I got this grant, and I was like, I guess we're doing this thing. And so we had this, it's actually like over a year ago, we were sort of in the thick of almost going, like a year ago in December, we will have done our very first showcase at like for IndigiBabes. And so like, in November, of last year, we were in like the thick of it, like learning how to take off our clothes, learning what musicality is, learning from all of these really amazing Indigenous voices about gender performing and burlesque and other Indigenous burlesque dancers, like their like philosophy of practice, because of like the the many layers of indigeneity and sort of cultural rules and thoughts. And I believe in them, and I understand them, and I respect them. And also I think that, the whole time I'm like, well, can't we be like sacred and sexy? Can't we be sacred and naked? Like, why does it have to be one or the other? And so we did our first show last December, so almost a year ago. And all of the people that were about to go, like that were in the workshop, were like, I don't know if I can do this. I'm really shy. Oh my gosh, I don't think I can get on stage and do this thing. And I was like, you all have bodily autonomy to do this. Like, if you are for sure not ready to do this, that's totally fine. And also, just try it. Just try it in this very safe space. And almost every single person that got off the stage is like, when are we doing this again? This was incredible. This was amazing. This was all the things. And so out of this, out of this need that I saw, and I try to be very humble. Like, I think also as a woman, I've sort of been told, like, don't be too proud. You have to be humble. Like, all of these, you can't be vain. You can't, boast too much. I don't think it was just me who did this thing. Like, I had the idea, but it took a lot of people to get IndigiBabes to hear. And it wasn't just me. It was the other participants. It was the other facilitators. It was the amazing Indigenous burlesque dancers who shared their own like stories of like finding, like, being comfortable in their indigeneity and also feeling like empowered to burlesque dance. And so we kind of accidentally created a movement of like Indigenous sensuality and sexuality and that reclamation of that. And I know it's not just like, it's not just me. Like, it's not like I was the first person to ever think of this, like none of that. But I think the IndigiBabes are sort of giving other people permission to feel sexy, or to want to feel sexy, that we can be sexy, and we can also be firmly rooted in our indigeneity. Not without, we've had some pushback. People, some folks have feelings about it, and that's okay. So that's, I don't know. I'm really, like, outside of my children and my partner, I'm really proud of IndigiBabes. Like, I'm really proud of this thing that I did. And I didn't do it myself, but like, this thing that I thought of that was just like, I wonder if, and now we get to, people are like, when's the next IndigiBabe show? Like, when are we doing these things? Like, I want to be a babe. The amount of people that come up to me after and is like, so I want to be a babe. How can we, like, can I be a babe? I'm like, yes, sort of. Yes. Yes.
And
So,
how you're saying, like, I wonder if, you had that moment, and I've seen you birth so many ideas, right? Like, over our time knowing each other.
Mhm.
And you worked at Toronto Birth Center, so like that was also part of your profession. And also when it comes to creative projects, you've also birthed ideas into tangible, practice. And often you do it also with a collective. So it's, to me, when I hear you talk about it, I, we, I, we, like that's like the way you lead. So I'm wondering, with IndigiBabes, from that question of, I wonder if, and then like, what was the creative process?
It was a YouTube spiral of like searching up things like Indigenous burlesque for Native, like, you know, like First Nations, you know, to find as many videos as I could about like who are Indigenous burlesque dancers? What does that look like? How, like, and I wanted something. There are so many incredible burlesque dancers that are like my heroes, like stars in my eyes, like, oh my gosh, you're so cool. I'm going to destroy her name because I am terrible at French, but Lulu Duchess de Rier, yes, is an Afro-Indigenous burlesque dancer out of Montreal, and she won Miss Exotic World like this past year, who's like the first ever Afro-Indigenous woman to ever win Miss Exotic World. She's like this incredible burlesque dancer, and there's this other really cool burlesque collective out of like in the West Coast, sort of like Vancouver, called the Virago Nation, and they are like rooted in their indigeneity. And I wanted, like, I definitely was like, I just want to know, like, why can't we do these things? I wonder if, and why can't we? And I think I've always been like a bit of a pushback on like, well, this is how Indigenous women are supposed to act. And I'm like, sure, that sounds fine for some folks. That's not who I am, and that means that I'm not a good Indigenous woman. And it was a lot, like, it definitely wasn't linear. It was, I wonder if Google search, YouTube search, I wonder if I'm going to talk to, you know, Belle, my friend Belle, and then she's going to give me some names, and then I'm going to go to burlesque shows, and then I'm going to start to get to know these folks. And they're like, the burlesque, the Indigenous burlesque dancers in Toronto are like helped with the workshops. And now whenever they see the IndigiBabes, they're like, oh, we're so proud aunties. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, you're my heroes. And then you're like, you know, these other like burlesque dancers who are like, to me, really like wonderful, powerful, amazing human beings are like, oh my gosh, the IndigiBabes are so cool. And I'm like, we're so cool. You're so cool. Thank you so much for coming to our show. Like, I come to your shows, and I like am in awe of you, and you come to our like little baby shows and think we're super cool. And so there's like, it definitely wasn't linear. It definitely wasn't like, I guess maybe on the other side of it, I'm like, oh, I just dream of this idea, and then it happens, and I have, you know, if you don't see the people who look like you, then you have to be the people who look like you. And all of that's true. And also it's a lot of like start, stop. And the self-doubt, like, you know, I think as racialized women, as, you know, for me as like an Indigenous woman, as a fat woman, as a woman who doesn't fit into like sort of the Western standards of anything, that voice in my head is like, you're not supposed to be doing this. This isn't for you. Why are you doing this? You know, that negative self-talk or that negative doubt, you know, sort of like sometimes is like, just stay in your lane, you know? And then I can be like, no, this talk, this self-doubt is why I have to do these things. Not only for myself, but like, do I think I'm going to change the world? No. Do I think that, you know, I can do things to make the world like a little bit better for like my daughters, my future ancestors, my community? Yeah. And even if it is something, you know, people might think it's frivolous, and sometimes it is, sometimes it's frivolousness can be like, is important though as well, that maybe this will create space for folks to feel like they can be playful. Indigenous people don't get to be playful. We don't get to be soft. We don't get to do these things. And I think that's all a part of the process of like, should I, like, this apprehension of, ooh, I don't know if I should do this thing. This is like a pretty, even for you, Denise, this is pretty out there. Like, this is a pretty big deal. And what if? I'm so glad I didn't just stop with like, somebody's going to be upset with you if you do this. I'm really glad that I was just like, no, you're just going to do it. You're just going to do it. And whatever happens, happens. Even if you fail, like, it's okay. You did it. You can say you did it. And I like that, like that's kind of the process. I just like sit and go in YouTube spirals and then think, and then like write out. I accidentally have like this manifesto for IndigiBabes because I was just like thinking of all these things that I always say all the time, and it's sort of evolved. Like IndigiBabes itself has evolved into something that I never dreamed about. I like at the very, like, I just want to get my tits out with my friends. I just want to really just like dance to a really good Prince song. I just want to feel sexy. I just want to feel good about myself in one space. And then it got to be like, especially as a teacher who teaches Indigenous studies, like who teaches Indigenous content, there was a time last year, like at this time last year, I was teaching like 5 Indigenous studies classes, and like 5 times a week or 4 times a week, I had to talk about Indigenous trauma. And I was like, I just need there to be a space where we celebrate Indigenous joy, where we celebrate Indigenous brilliance. I cannot always be performing this trauma. It's tiring. Why can't we have a different conversation? I think that's why I do these things. I just want a different conversation. I just want to be like, Indigenous people are all of these things that you're learning, and also this other thing.
And where do you think this is going? Do you see it?
I try not to put like, I know lots of people like, you should have goals and you should have direction, and there's lots of shoulds. I'm just gonna, like, in my wildest dreams, do I want it to be like we have this show called Not Your Sacred Object, where we talk about owning ourselves and all of these other things, and just celebrating Indigenous joy. And in the the nights when I'm sort of lying in bed thinking about what could be, would I want like a Canadian or a Turtle Island tour of Not Your Sacred Object, and people just come to the like education of the IndigiBabes? Sure. Would I love to just like quit all of the other 9-to-5 gigs and be a burlesque dancer? Probably. Or like performer and like be able to like support my family and live a good life that way? Yes. I want to do it until I don't want to do it anymore, or until I'm just like, okay, we're going to go do a show, blah, like, and not be excited about it anymore. Because even now, and we've performed a lot over the last year, like a lot over the last year, I still get nervous. I'm still like, oh my gosh, what if I forget my steps? Oh my gosh, what if, like worried about, I still get nervous. I still get jitters. I still worry about like, are people going to come to shows? What if nobody shows up? But it wasn't for, and then I have to remind myself, like, it's not for everybody. Like, I actually didn't even do this for there to be shows. I just wanted to do this to have fun with people. to like celebrate the ceremony of our bodies together, and like celebrate that we come from the land and that we still exist, and like Indigenous joy, Indigenous brilliance, and like to show how different we are. Like it wasn't for other people. And so I don't actually have, you know, I don't have goals. So whatever happens for us, however long it happens for, I think that's great. And then, you know, my kids get to have these like stories they tell my grandchildren, like your grandma, she did these like, you know, she was a burlesque dancer and she was a comedian and she was a teacher and she was like, I think my goal is to have really cool stories for my ancestors to tell.
And how did you get to this point? Like, how did you get to this place where you're making all these things happen? You're part of collectives and accidentally starting movements. How did you get here? And something I wanted to take us back is, as far back as you'd like, or as most recent as you'd like. Are there decisions in your life that you think enabled you to get to this moment?
So I was just, so weirdly enough, as we record this, I got a copy of a book that I'm published in. It's called Silence to Strength, and it's writings and reflections on the 60s Scoop. And I wrote my story of being like a 60 Scoop, a scooped kid. I wasn't born in the 60s, I was born in the 80s, but I was one of the last generations to be scooped. And reading it just before you and I talked, like reading it and like even crying as I'm reading it out loud to my partner, even though I wrote the words, it's my story, and still like in tears. And, you know, a friend of mine said, Denise, every time you do a thing, you bring people along with you, which was like a very beautiful compliment to me. And quite truly, I felt alone for a really long time. I felt alone as a child. I felt alone as a young mom. I felt alone for a really long time. And I really wanted to find my people. I wanted to find my people, like my people, my family, the people who want to spend time with me. Because for a really long time, I thought I was unlovable, unlikable. There was something wrong with me. And really held that as like, that was true. That was the truth. And again, if you don't see the people who look like you, then you have to be the people. I don't want people to feel alone. And I don't want people to feel like they're not heard. And so being in collective, which is very like lovely Western word of just being in community, I want people to feel like they have community. I want to quite selfishly, it's not selfish, like I quite selfishly want to ensure that I have community. And I think I know that's why I always have people, like I always ensure that there's people along with me. And also, you know, I was talking about this with students of mine. And in the West, because we have such a scarcity mentality, we hoard our knowledge. So we are the only ones with that knowledge. We are the only ones. And therefore, we are able to make money. It's like late stage capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. What happens when I am no longer here? Does all of my knowledge just go with me? Well, that just seems silly. That just seems like, what a waste of my life. Like I've acquired all this knowledge, and now what? I just take it with me? That's the ultimate Western capitalist mentality. And so if I bring people with me, they're also learning these things, and we can also disperse the knowledge so that we can ensure that survival happens, healing happens, whatever. And so, yeah, like, I say it very like articulately and eloquently now, but I just didn't want to be alone.
And what does it feel like to be not alone and in community? What does that feel like for you?
It feels like home. It feels like love. It feels like, in a very selfish way, like it feels validating that other people see me and want to and value me, and in a non-capitalist way, like they value my presence in their lives, yeah, it feels very validating. It feels like I'm healing that kid that didn't feel worthy enough.
Denise, you talked about as you're bringing people with you and alongside you, and for you personally healing that child, you talked about knowledge, and I know also one of your many gifts is teaching. You mentioned that at the beginning. And as a comedian, burlesque dancer, as a professor, as a mother, you're constantly teaching. And so what is some knowledge you would like to impart on our society writ large in this moment?
I think that as someone who does like anti-racism work, anti-oppression work, equity, diversity, and inclusion work, and largely focuses on anti-Indigenous racism, I really want folks to know that like there's more than one story for Indigenous folks. Like there's more than one story. There's more to the story than you've been told. And that people have a responsibility to learn all of the stories of the history of Canada. How I talk about history of Canada is like, there's the history that we've been taught in school, and there is like truth in that. There is some truth in that. And then there's this other history, the other side of the history of Indigenous people that most folks don't know, haven't learned. And that's also true. Like there are two, like both things are true. Both of those stories are true. Maybe there's more truth in one than the other, but like that Indigenous people are worthy and valuable and brilliant and beautiful and more than capable, and we're more than the stories that have been told about us. And really the only goal that I have lots of goals, I guess, like secretly I have lots of goals, and I say like my only goal is, but really I think the most important thing, my for real goal is to ensure that like my children, my future ancestors, my community's children, my chosen family's children, and all of their future ancestors, they're all safe to like participate and walk down the street and live in Toronto and get accessible health care. Like they can go to any organization and feel like they're going to get culturally safe care or culturally humble care. I think that's the thing that I want folks to know is like, we're more than the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We're more than Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. We're more than Starlight Tours. We're more than all of these really important things that people sort of talk about sometimes in this like guilty way, like, oh, you know, Indigenous people don't have clean drinking water. We feel really bad as we go and buy a case of water because we don't like to drink Toronto water. Like, you know, these thoughts, that I think those are like, it's not a very roundabout answer to your question. I don't know. I think that's the answer. Like those are the things I want to teach people. Those are the things I want people to hear. Like, I want people to be like critical. You can be proud to be Canadian, also be critical of the country in which you live in. And one doesn't cancel out the other. And the guilt that you feel actually doesn't, like, you can feel guilty. That doesn't actually support the like advancement of Indigenous folks. Like, we need more than allies. We need accomplices and co-conspirators to support the advancement of Indigenous rights, freedoms, movement. You know, like we're doing great. And also, when we work together, we can get so much more achieved. Like, so much more can be achieved. You know? I don't know if that's really answering your question.
Oh, that is more than answering the question. You set up a vision for the kind of world that we need to build.
We all need to build.
Yeah, exactly. And as you're teaching this and want to teach more on this, I'm also wondering, how did you become clear, or how did you explore what your skills and gifts and talents were? You know, like when I think about, for example, let's use your comedy. You use humor to subvert oppressive systems. How did you know that was one of your gifts?
I've had a lot of people tell me for a really long time that, wow, Dee, you're really funny. And I'm like, oh, thanks, blah, blah, blah. Like, I wasn't very pretty in high school, so I had to develop a personality in a very self-deprecating Canadian type of humor. And I also noticed that you can say some hard truths when it's funny. Like, people don't when folks feel guilty, oof, they shut down deep, like fast, so fast. When people feel guilty, they shut down very quickly and they don't want to hear anything else. And my comedy is telling my story about like horrific colonization and attempted assimilation and genocide. And I tell it in such a way that people are like, you're really funny. And I learned so much. And I think about, you know, I didn't have the confidence. Like, if you had told my eldest daughter's 20, almost 21. If you had have told me at 21, like if you had told me 20 years ago that this is where I was going to be right here, right now, I never would have believed you. This is my most wildest version of the dream of what I thought I was going to be when I was an adult. And I just had people like, once I found the people who believed in me and saw me and heard me and trusted me and loved me and cared for me, when they started telling me, hey, you're really funny, or hey, you're really good at like talking, you're very good at teaching, I believed them. Because I was like, a lot of people are saying this, so it must not be a lie. Like, people aren't just going to tell you this to make you feel good. Like, when we first met, our former boss, Crystal, was such a huge supporter of like all of the things I did. like would actually like, hey, I really want you to go and do this talk. Hey, I really want you to go and do this thing. And she was like one of those initial sort of mentor type people who really like gave like sort of gave me permission to start using my voice and start being who I am. And then, you know, I started teaching 7 years ago, and it was because one of my former teachers was like, hey, have you ever thought about teaching? And I was like, what are you talking about? Who would want me as a teacher? That doesn't even make sense. And I've been doing it for 7 years, and I have students all the time be like, I don't even come to school, but you're my favorite this is my favorite class. I'm always in your class. And so I think it was others believing in me until I started believing in myself. You know, that really were like my cheerleaders. And like, I think about my two best friends who are like my sisters, like my chosen family. And, you know, without them and without their support, like, I don't know. I don't know if I would do half the things that I do. Like, really, maybe I would, but I don't think it would be, I don't know. I think it'd just be a different version of this. And I don't know if it'd be as cool without them beside me and without my partner being my cheerleader and without, you know, my kids like secretly being proud of all of the things that I do. Like, they're never going to tell, oh my God, they're never going to tell me. Like, I'm super proud that you're a burlesque dancer, Mom. Like, no, you know, but they do tell other people.
Yeah.
And so like they're also proud of the things I do. And so I like, you know, I think about it and like I just want my kids to be proud of me in like not in this way, like I just want them to be proud of their mom, you know? Like I think all, maybe not all parents. I want to be a parent where my children are proud of me. That they're proud of like the things that I've accomplished for our community and also how I've loved them.
And you made it.
I'm here. I'm here. Right here, right now is really cool. And I wouldn't change a thing.
Okay, I have one final question. I have so many more, but I'm like, okay. I know because of who you are and your values and the way you lead and the and you know the importance of community, that you are sharing these stories, honoring people around you who have believed in you, which then has supported you in believing yourself, and you still had to make a choice and a decision with, let's say, teaching or doing comedy or doing community work or moving back to Toronto when you were in UK. You still had to make decisions. And so what tools or what do you do when some of that doubt creeps up where you're like, wait, me? What do you do to make you choose and decide to try things?
I think you know, for a long time I really struggled to like find a job and to, you know, I started going on it probably wasn't until my 30s, like there's this thing that I do that I'm like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you do this thing? Like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I think it was through a lot of counseling, actually, that like, if you do comedy, like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen to you? You're going to bomb. Nobody's going to laugh. Okay. Well, then what? And so what? Like, you're embarrassed for a day or two, and then you're like, Are you going to get physically hurt? Are you going to lose something? Are you like, is something going to happen to you? And I think that's the thing that kind of, I'm like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? I have anxiety. I actually have mild PTSD. I just got recently diagnosed with ADHD, just the effects of living through colonization. And I don't have the same inhibitions that are like, my level of inhibitions is probably a little bit higher than most people. Like I don't really don't worry too much about it. I worry all the time, but about things that are like silly, the things that I shouldn't have to worry about. And so I think that is also the like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to bomb, or, you know, you're burlesque dancing and you fall. Well, you fell. You know, like everyone's still going to cheer you on. That's not going to change who you are as a person, because I've lived in such like, for more of my life, I've lived in this fear of failure, in this fear of like, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. Like I'm not worthy because I'm not enough. And now, you know, at 41, I'm like, so what? Like, nobody's enough. Nobody's enough in these like unattainable goals that the West has put on us because of capitalism and patriarchy and white supremacy and ableism and homophobia and all of these other things. Like, you're never going to fit into that. So just do this thing. Just do it. Like, it's okay if you fail. And I think like moving to the UK was scary, and moving home from the UK was scary. And also was like having a baby at 20 and then having another one at 22, and then going to college as a single mom, and you know, raising two Indigenous children. Like, all of it's scary. Life is scary. That's the thing they don't tell you, is being an adult is scary. It's scary all the time. You have to make these like ridiculous choices every day. And it's you know, ridiculous choices like, do I sleep in an extra half an hour and be late for work, or not get my coffee, or do I just get up? Like, you know, silly arbitrary choices, but like all of it could change your life. And I think I'm not fearless by any means. And also, it's the worst thing that's going to happen.
That is the last note. And what a way to end our conversation. What is the worst that can happen? And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and your stories. I'm always so inspired by you and who you are in the world, and how you create and lead and bring people together, and how you mother. And so thank you so much. I'm so excited for people who are watching this to learn from you through this video, and I'm so excited for your next show.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for inviting me to chat, Chill. I hope that people take what they need and leave the rest.
Thank you for watching. If you're interested in exploring your passion, check out my website, shilby.com. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Firestart Chat.